Okay, hello, my name is Eric Ellis, and I'm delighted to be able to be a part of this meeting. And we're going to have a fireside chat. And before we do that, I'd like to share just a few foundational kinds of slides. I appreciate all of you that took the time to participate in our survey, our short survey of 3 questions. And believe it or not, we are going to give you some of the feedback that you all provided for us. So the first thing I think is important is if you can see this chart, it provides some information from the Institute for Corporate Productivity. They did a racial equity survey following George Floyd's death and found that 72% of corporations said yes, we are internally focused on addressing biases within the organization, representation, compensation, advancement. 60% said yes. We are specifically doing that in response to George Floyd's death. And then 33% said yes, externally focused on larger issues in the society. And so we see that a number of organizations have decided to try to focus on racial equity in many ways in response to what happened with George Floyd. I believe that if we look at our country in 1964, 45% of adults were smokers in the United States. And then the Surgeon General's report came out. And then we did that talked about the impact that smoking had on your lungs and your heart. And then we had probably 10 or 15 years of public service announcements. And so today, only 13% of adults are smokers. I would say to you that in many ways, the George Floyd death, coupled and occurring during a time when people were sheltering in place, it wasn't a split-second decision. It was something that took place over 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And I think that collectively, many of us felt outraged. And we saw that around this country, and we saw protests around the world. And I think that, for me, it felt like a year ago, Black Lives Matter was saying that was almost like saying a 4-letter word. And now today, on my phone, I'll get messages that say Black Lives Matter, DSW, or Black Lives Matter, TJ Maxx. And so I believe that it's so important for us to have the conversation that we're having today that says, how do we look at organizations pivoting to make sure that we are establishing meaningful value and meaningful change? What I'm seeing is young people around the country and around the world are beginning to, there's sort of organic protest, if you will, that's coming to the surface. Many people are saying, thank you for your messages and your CEO statements. But, what does your board look like? What does your leadership look like? What does supplier diversity look like? And so let's continue to look at how you all are looking at this. We asked you a couple of questions. The first one was your level of confidence that corporations will sustain their commitment to racial equity in supplier diversity. And here's the way that you responded to that. For corporate members, 53% said that they had sort of a high level of confidence that corporations will sustain their commitment to racial equity and supplier diversity. 41% said they had a moderate level of confidence that that will occur, and 6% said they had a low level of confidence. If we look at how certified MBEs responded to that same question, then we have 13% of MBEs said that they had a high level of confidence that corporations will sustain their commitment to racial equity and supplier diversity. 56% said they had a moderate level of confidence, and 31% said they had a low level of confidence. And so we're seeing slightly 2 different worlds. There's a lot of moderate belief that we will sustain the commitment to racial equity and supplier diversity. Let's look at the next question, where we asked, how would you rate the current effectiveness of corporate supplier diversity in general based upon your direct experience? And so when asked that question, corporate members, we had 29% said their experience is above average, 65% said it's about average, and then 6% said it was below average. If you look at certified MBEs, you find that only 2% said that their experience, their direct experience, was above average. 49% said it was average, and 49% said it was below average. And then we actually had a third category of others, and there maybe 10 or 15 people there. 55% said that it was average, and 45% said it was below average. And this is responding to the question, how would you rate the current effectiveness of corporate supplier diversity in general based upon your direct experience? And so I've seen this for a number of years. There's a part of me that believes that these experiences are absolutely what you make them, and you've got to do everything you can to come here prepared to connect with people and to make the kind of connections that may be meaningful and help you grow your business. But also we need to make sure that we are bringing the kinds of people that have opportunities that can be available. And we're seeing that there's a slight disconnect in terms of how corporate members see some of that and how MBEs see that as well. And then a number of you gave open-ended responses, and what specific advice would you offer corporations for actions they can and or should take to improve racial equity within their supplier diversity efforts? And 28% said develop a long-term commitment to sustainability with an action plan. 24% said better contact with an assessment of diverse suppliers. 17% said truly commit to the process through involvement from all levels. 16% said ensure supplier diversity is aligned with corporate goals. And then 4% said develop a program for suppliers, for diverse suppliers. And so one of the things that I believe that it's a term that I've established. I've been doing this work for sure will be 30 years. And certainly I've seen some organizations make some tremendous progress in the space of diversity and inclusion. I believe that we have to be combining our focus on workforce diversity and understanding things like implicit bias with our initiatives and our efforts as it relates to supplier diversity. A concept that I've developed that I encourage people to do, it's something that I call embracing disruptive curiosity. In other words, after we finish this conversation today, I would suggest to you that that is the ground floor. That's the foundation. And what I would encourage people to do is to disruptive thinking we're familiar with, disruptive innovation we're familiar with, but disruptive curiosity. I would suggest that when you leave here today, that what if you were to start with the hypothesis that everything I think I know about supplier diversity, about systemic racism and sexism, what if everything I think I know is wrong? How might I utilize my own personal curiosity to learn more about how well we're doing through our diverse suppliers, through our diverse employees and our customers that we serve? And so that's what I want to encourage people to do, is to leave here prepared to engage in curiosity in order to grow your own perspective. I also talk about this notion of sustainable inclusion. I believe that that's the only way forward, that in the world that we live today, it feels like we're in the midst of ideological civil war. And oftentimes people look at this whole thing as a zero-sum game, that if you win, then I lose. If I win, then you lose. And I believe that the only way forward is to recognize that inclusion is the right answer. And I've defined sustainable inclusion as a constant state of becoming more inclusive. And so every day that I get up, I'm excited about who I'm going to meet and who I'm going to interact with and what I'm going to learn. I believe that sustainable inclusion also has to equal maximize business results. In other words, if we're not talking about how we deliver better results for corporations, then we probably don't have a sustainable supplier diversity initiative or an inclusion initiative in and of itself. And so with that, that sort of takes us to our distinguished panel, and I'm so grateful to have these 6 individuals that are going to join with us in this fireside chat. And what I'd like to do is we have 2 sets of questions here. We have a set of questions for corporate members, and then we have a couple of questions for certified MBEs. The questions for the corporate members are, we're asking them to sort of introduce themselves and then to describe your organization. How is it ensuring racial equity through supplier diversity or responding to our current cultural environment? The second question that they'll respond to is identify any successes and or challenges resulting from your efforts to become more inclusive. And then our MBEs have a couple of slightly different questions. Number one, how has COVID-19 and the global protests impacted your business positively or negatively? And then the second question is, what does racial equity through supplier diversity mean to you? And what changes would signal to you that sustainable progress is being made? We're also going to allow you as the audience to weigh in on this. And we have a process here where you'll be able to sort of raise your hand and ask questions. What we'd like to do is we'll have the panelists start off. They'll introduce themselves, they'll answer their questions, and then we'll take maybe one or two questions for each panelist as we go so that we keep this thing interactive. And so if it's okay, Nalini Bates is the Senior Director of Supplier Citizenship for Procter & Gamble. Why don't you introduce yourself and then answer those two questions?
Thank you so much, Eric. I hope everyone can hear me okay. What an amazing panel and amazing introduction, Eric. I think what you have shared today really helps illuminate some of the big challenges that we have in front of us, and I'm delighted to share what we're doing here at P&G. As Eric said, I'm Senior Director of Supplier Citizenship, which sits in our purchasing function at the company, and am responsible for not only our global supplier diversity program, but also responsible sourcing. So I work essentially every day with my team to enable our buyers around the world to invest in collaboration with our external business partners to make meaningful progress in these spaces. And as we heard, there's a lot to do. So I will spend a couple minutes giving you a flavor of how the last 6 months have gone for us, which has been tremendously challenging, of course, but also very inspirational. And I hope you feel the same way. And then I would love to keep a couple minutes for questions, so I hope to not ramble on too much. As we've all alluded to, the unfortunate events that have taken place this year caused us all to pause and really gave us the opportunity to rethink, are we educated enough on these topics, and do we talk enough? And our company has done a great job keeping that dialogue active to really bring to light what are some of the personal experiences, professional experiences that we have experienced in the company or in the communities that we live in. And that dialogue, I think, was very important because it helped build a really big level of empathy that we didn't have before. And what that then led to was awareness and really broad opinion from our senior leadership that we all have to do more. And it's across multiple vectors, not just supplier diversity, but in many other spaces too. And I'm just going to take you through a couple of the things that we've done, because I think this idea of making sure we are doing sustainable work, and when we say we want to do more, that more also has to be sustainable. So we didn't want to, have knee-jerk reactions and kind of, give money here and there and say, okay, we're reacting. It's not about the reaction. It's about what are we putting in place as action plans? Do we have the support of leadership? And that's what I'll take you through a little bit. I think actually Jackie and Ellie mentioned some of these, so not to be repetitive, but maybe just to underscore the fact the company did put together a Take on Race fund. P&G's Take on Race initiative is actually not new. It's for a couple years we've been investing to partner with different corporations and councils around the country to help tackle some very systemic issues. We have a website that I think Dana's going to try to share on the png.com homepage called Take on Race. And it's made open to the public. The HR team at the company has put together tremendous resources to educate everybody on the topic. So I encourage you, if you Thanks, Dana. I see that come through now. To take a look at that website, because there's a lot of great content there, and use it however you want internally. We also spent time looking at our media. So for those that may have seen some of our ads, the look, the talk in the past, we re-released those this past summer because people wanted to educate themselves and really develop more empathy. We also created some new videos, most recently a video about redefining Black. And you can find those on that website too, really great short 2, 3, 4-minute videos. And so it's using a little bit of our media expertise to help people start the conversation, because we do think that is super important. Also, over the last year, our new Chief Equality and Inclusion Officer, Shelly McNamara, has been putting together a new strategy for P&G. What is the evolution of the diversity and inclusion and gender equality work that we want to do? And so she has really focused on the concept of moving to equality and inclusion, where people not only have access, opportunities to operate equally across the population, but also have this feeling of inclusion. And so I think it's really important that we all center ourselves on this idea of economically empowering and all the different vectors that we have. And Eric alluded to it earlier. It's not only looking at ourselves. What does our employee diversity look like? What does our board look like? We just added a female African American to our board. We've promoted 2 African Americans to the C-suite this year in North America sales and in our Chief Communications Officer. So we are looking internally as well. Supplier diversity is actually very pronounced in our new equality inclusion strategy, which for me and my team is immensely powerful, because our executives are now going to be held accountable for delivering against supplier diversity goals, and that is unprecedented at the company. While we've had a program for 40 years, this hard wiring into our business, into what our leaders are accountable for, has never happened before. So this is some of the good and positive that has come out of the last 6 months. And again, I want to hopefully give you a level of confidence that this will, in a systemic and sustainable way, continue to have supplier diversity be a priority for the company. And so we do love the support of OMSDC, WEBEC ORV in the state, and also at the national level. I mean, these are partners without which we couldn't do this work and we couldn't progress. So I thank all of you for participating. I am so excited to hear from the other panelists too, because what I find tremendously encouraging in the supplier diversity world is that we collaborate across our corporations. So I'm excited to hear from my other friends on the panel, and thank you, Eric, for giving me the chance to share what
Thank you, Nalini. That was outstanding. I agree with you that it is exciting that you all are creating some executive accountability for supplier diversity. I think that is awesome. I don't know if you know this, but my father started his career in diversity as an internal consultant at Procter & Gamble in the 70s, and then left there to start his own business and to help start the industry. But I don't know, James Price is going to be fielding questions. For me, I'm more interested in questions from you all, if you have them, before I pose a question. So, James, do we have any questions?
Eric, no questions at this time, but I will continue to monitor the Q&A box.
Nalini, I will ask you a question or two. Number one, what does Procter & Gamble see as the business value for inclusion? How is Procter & Gamble looking at it from a business standpoint? Because I think that's important. I love the way that you all are focused on inclusion, but what business value does it have for the company?
Yeah, thank you for asking. You know, about 4 or 5 years ago, we put together what we call our Citizenship Strategy. And it is our way of wanting to be a force for good and force for growth. Equality and inclusion falls under our Citizenship Strategy. And for us, we've always said this. I mean, I've been with the company 20 years, and I can remember since day one that we and our senior leaders say it often. The power of diversity is in innovation. Better business solutions come from having diverse people around the table. And that's not only true internally in terms of employees, but we have really seen that to be true in our supply chain. We want to have a diverse set of suppliers. We need big ones, we need small ones, we need ones that can help us look around corners and see what trends are coming next, but we also need ones that can ensure they're filling the supply chain. I mean, take this summer as an example. Paper towels are flying off the shelf, right? So I think it's really important that we think about the value that different types of companies can bring to what we call our external ecosystem. And it's been great over the last couple months, and actually the rollout of our new E&I strategy is happening this month. So I'm actually sharing a lot with you, things that not all of our employees have even heard yet. But we talk about it just in the same way when it comes to the supply chain. If we want to grow our business, we need to have diverse people and diverse companies that are contributing value in all different ways.
Let me ask. Thank you for that awesome answer. Let me ask you another question that might be a little tougher. It's almost like the interview question that we get. You know, what are your weaknesses? I think it's so important during these times that we be authentic, transparent around the difficulties that we face in trying to move the needle. Our country, after 9/11, sort of came together and bonded in such a powerful way. But almost like a rubber band, at some point, the country began to sort of go back to tribalism and some of the political things that we're seeing today. What do you see as some of the challenges that you all still face, specifically maybe around supplier diversity and racial equity, but also as a company? What do you see as some of the challenges that you all face?
Yeah, of course, we still have many challenges, and maybe I'll just, as one example, talk about we find it, you know, while incumbency is a great policy to have, we feel like giving incumbents suppliers the right to retain their business, but also make sure they don't feel like they have a right to retain it. And I think that sometimes gets really hard when we're trying to introduce new suppliers, when we're trying to figure out, can we work with small, medium-sized businesses? This continues to be a challenge for us. When we look at supplier diversity, and you know, we have wonderful champions that sit in the different businesses that come to conferences and do matchmaking with us. The challenge remains to find companies that can maybe compete with some of the bigger suppliers that we might have experience with. And so knowing that's a challenge, we try to do a couple things. One is invest in capability building. So we do spend time, you know, helping all boats rise and kind of building a pipeline of potential suppliers for corporations like us. We work very closely with our peers like Fifth Third and Kroger, who I know are here today. You know, how can we work together to invest in that pipeline of suppliers? And then we also really are focusing a lot on second tier because of that. So some of our suppliers, you know, have just tremendous opportunity to build their spend with diverse-owned suppliers. So we're spending a lot of time bringing them on the journey. And we're actually going to kind of put a little bit more emphasis on this in our supplier performance reviews going forward, making sure that they're growing their programs, that they're putting themselves out there, that they're giving access and opportunities to diverse-owned businesses. So that's all part of the puzzle that we have to put together to really make progress.
Thank you, Nalini. Let's move on to our next panelist is Carlton D. Dean III, President and CEO of Sterile Waste Solutions. Carlton, why don't you come on, introduce yourself a little bit more, and maybe respond to the two questions that we posed to the certified MBEs.
Thank Ohio Minority Supplier Development Council for putting together this wonderful event. I'm glad to be a part of it. And I also want to thank all the corporations for taking time out of their schedules to be able to continue to contribute great content to these events and obviously the current issues that are going on. Good morning. My name is Carlton Dean from DeMarc Building Services and also Sterile Waste Solutions. DeMarc Building Services is a Class A facility service company that's also certified with OMSDC. And Sterile Waste Solutions is a medical waste hauler and transporter for medical waste. So I want to get right into these two questions. The first question is really around COVID-19 and a global protest. And when I think about this first question, I had to step away and think about what the impact has meant to me personally, right? COVID-19, I think, took the United States and the world by storm. There was a lot of organizations that wasn't prepared for it. I kind of play in that game where we are sterilizing facilities and cleaning facilities and doing things like that. So we were actually able to kind of spin up and be able to pivot very, very quickly with providing a lot of our clients with PPE to be able to protect themselves from exposure. We're also able to pivot and do ULV fogging and electrostatic spraying and a lot of different things for a lot of our clients to be able to pivot and keep their facilities safe as effective as we could. And it was amazing to be able to capitalize on this kind of a roller coaster, right? I think you had a lot of businesses that either fell or they were able to stand up and do what they needed to do. So for me, we were able to pivot pretty quickly. We had a strong, solid foundation. We had a great base of clients that were able to work with us, and our financial numbers were fantastic through the first 6 months of the year. And I can say there's a lot of businesses that couldn't say that. We were able to pick up a lot of project work, and it definitely helped our bottom line. Negatively, and not to focus on anything negative, because I think there's a positive in everything. We had some issues with our internal culture. We employ people, obviously, of all different backgrounds, equal opportunity employer. But I had to, if I could put this correctly, I had to have uncomfortable conversations with individuals that did not want to have those conversations. And it was challenging. I think in this time, we can't focus on right answers or wrong answers. I think we need to just listen, right? And we need to listen, and we need to evaluate, and we need to put best practices in place. And I had to do a lot of listening to people that did not necessarily understand, my background or where I come from, or understand the events that are going on. And just dialogue, which is a really big thing for us, and we continue to talk about communication within our organization every day. So we have realized and identified a very, very big weakness in our company, and it is that some of our employees, since we have such diverse people, don't understand or don't respect what's going on. And unfortunately, that's led to us making some changes in staffing. It's helped us understand that we need to do some more leadership and ethnic training for some of our employees. So this is definitely brought to attention that we need to address from an HR perspective, some things that we need to change about our internal culture. But again, for us, as long as we're having these conversations and we're addressing the topics, I think you're making progress within your organizations. And then from a racial equity and a supplier diversity perspective, there's a few things that kind of come to mind. I think more importantly, minority companies are looking for real opportunities. And obviously all the companies that are a part of OMSDC, they're here, they're providing these opportunities. But I challenge everybody to take additional steps to move forward, not just with contracting opportunities, but to focus on also their own internal culture as well. It's great to put out RFPs and to look for diverse businesses to work for, but when I can go to your corporate website and I can't see one ethnic person on your board or one ethnic manager within your organization, you talk a good game, but internally you're not producing. And those are the things that I think corporations need to, the ones that aren't doing it or having those conversations, that's what they need to be focusing on. You got a lot of different heads on this monster, right? So you got your supplier diversity, but you also have your internal diverse organization within your current client base, also your personnel, things like that. So you have a couple different things you have to kind of figure out as an organization. And how you need to pivot and make change. So I think there's a lot of organizations out there that do it really well, but there's some really big companies that, quite frankly, I don't know if they care. When you start talking about BLM and all these different movements that are really taking place now because of the events of George Floyd and many of Breonna Taylor, and there's many other events that we can point to, it's really easy to put out a statement, right? It's really easy to say, oh, we care about all lives, and here's what we want to do, and we're gonna give $1 million to this cause. It's like, okay, that's great, but when you're a $50 billion company, what's $1 million, to a cause? I mean, it's easy to write a check. It's a little bit different when you're actually, putting your executives through leadership training and focusing and putting together programs to really help develop the diverse businesses that are working with your corporation, giving them leadership training and executive training and long-term POs and bigger contracts and carving opportunities out for them that they normally wouldn't have. So it's just a few of the things that I think could help us change. Fortunately enough, we have some amazing corporations in Central Ohio that I think are already have their best foot forward. We have some great relationships, with Ohio Health. We do amazing work with the Columbus Zoo and plenty of other clients that they've already tackled this, and they've been addressing this thing years ago. And it's exciting to continue to grow our business with those corporations and continue to move forward. So.
Well, Carlton, I'll tell you, man, I really want to thank you for that passionate response. I want to congratulate you on the success that your company is experiencing. And I also want to thank you and commend you on the transparency that you shared about your own company culture and things that you have to work on, as well as some challenge that you put forth for corporate sponsors. James, I think we've got a couple of questions in the queue. Let's see if we can fire one at Carlton, and then we'll go on to our next panel. Or two.
Okay. From a Carlton perspective, I'm going to put this out to the panelists. I think this is a better general question. It says, what recommendations do you have for companies that have not focused on business diversity in the past, only workforce diversity? What ideas do you have for them considering starting a supplier diversity strategy in terms of action items?
Right. And so, so right now Carlton, we'll let you respond to that because I want to make sure that we get through each of the panelists. And then, James, hold on to all those questions because we'll come back to them at the end.
I guess if you're an organization that does not have some sort of program in place, I think there's diverse businesses out here that specialize in that, right? I think there's some consulting organizations that you could hire to, or individuals that you can seek out to potentially help build these programs for you. If you don't have that kind of internal process already, I know there's, again, like reach out to Ohio State that's doing these leadership training and this Ascend program and things with OMSDC. I think there's a lot of resources out there now just by picking up the phone called reaching out to NAACP. I mean, there's organizations that will help you put a supplier diversity program in place.
Excellent. Well, Carlton, thank you very much for your presentation, your comments. Let's move on to our third panelist, and that's Simrit Sandhu. She is Chief Supply Chain and Support Services Officer for the Cleveland Clinic. Simrit.
Good morning, team. Can you hear me? I always start with, can you hear me on a video chat. So I guess yes. Well, it's a pleasure to be talking to all of you. And Carlton, I cannot agree with you more. I was taken aback and blown away by everything you just said. Very passionate and absolutely spot on. Very much like Procter & Gamble, the Cleveland Clinic has a host of corporate programs and governance around supplier diversity. Starting with the fact that supplier diversity at the Cleveland Clinic does not report to me. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer, right? I run procurement, supply chain, materials, food services, linen, patient transport, volunteer services, call center. But supplier diversity doesn't report to me. I'm held accountable by supplier diversity. Supplier diversity reports through an independent body that directly reports to our board. And that board subcommittee is made up of a number of individuals of diverse backgrounds who understand the needs of diverse suppliers, who are diverse suppliers, who are part of our community and want sustainable change. So the two words that we ground ourselves on is sustainability and accountability, not just an action item or a program. change comes through constant dialogue and walking the talk, right? So part of the change I have seen recently is this ability to have more what I would call systemic dialogue and the ability to start engaging and educating our internal stakeholders at deeper levels. I would tell you that our C-suite, our board is committed. We have programs in place, everything from mentor-protege programs for construction and our supply chain. We have set-asides. We have programs where we do tier 2 maximization. We've also put in contract language that now mandates that our tier 1s use a certain % of their spend with minority suppliers. But what I want to focus on is a program called Lift Every Voice that we have implemented internally that I have absolutely loved. Everybody from our CEO to myself, to my managers, engage in dialogues with people of different backgrounds, color, socioeconomic status, to talk about what diversity means to them and to share their personal experiences. And Carlton said something that I absolutely echo, which is when you look around at organizations, how many diverse people do you see at the table making decisions or influencing decisions? And how many people at that table truly have perspective and understand the subject matter? So one thing I started with is this particular year I start my staff meetings with my reports talking about systemic racism is real. Let's first acknowledge that. Secondarily, we all have different opinions about the subject. I would like each one of you to share your opinion with me. Secondarily, from this point on, every week we will talk about what we are doing individually and as an organization to make a change happen. And let's start both internally within our workforce and externally with our diversity programs. And it's interesting to start igniting that discussion and passion of change within the organization. Because the programs exist, the set-asides exist. The mentor-protege program has gone on forever, but the passion internally is reaching new levels. I'm seeing this ability to have a dialogue, to interact, and then to reflect, leading to true change. So change is a journey, as we all know. The systemic problems we face in society did not happen overnight. And the systemic change that we need, or that the disruption that we need, has to be a journey as well. And very proud to say that we are engaged in that journey of constant dialogue and holding ourselves accountable to a sustainable roadmap that spans a host of programs, but most importantly is engaging with the communities, engaging with our employees to ensure that we create change. So, I will go down Carlton's path again and talk about what an organization like mine is doing internally to make that happen. Something as simple as spanning my organization of almost 1,800 employees, direct and indirect, that do work such as patient transport or do work such as food services and linen. If you look around this workforce, what you find is an interesting disparity. A disproportionate number of people of color working in what I would call some of those entry-level jobs, right? Linen, food services, patient transport, and a disproportionately lower number of those individuals working in organizations such as procurement or administration. And one of the things that I have challenged my leaders to do is start rotating employees and create career paths. And I want to see a patient transporter getting a biomedical degree and moving into clinical engineering. What I want to see is a co-op program that allows somebody in food services to become a procurement expert. Because those are the changes that, A, we can make in our communities directly, and secondarily, by making those changes internally and forcing our leaders to understand this, we are also creating the kind of culture and passion that helps them understand and truly grow diverse suppliers within our communities and nationally. So I think some of the work that we need to do has to be grassroots, as well as the corporate work that we talk about in terms of governance, sustainable roadmap, holding ourselves accountable, board accountability, diversity in terms of measurement and sustainability. But a lot of work to be done in changing the cultures of organizations, creating passion at an individual stakeholder level, and then ensuring that we acknowledge and share successes, and that we are as probably transparent about places where we haven't had success or are struggling. We've had tremendous successes. We've not done too well in some areas. So, and we're very, very honest with ourselves in that dialogue. We can't stop trying. And I believe that we've made tremendous progress at the Cleveland Clinic, but there is a long way ahead and a long journey ahead. I heard Carlton also mention Ohio Health. Actually, we partner, the clinic partner with Ohio Health and Supply Chain. We work very closely with them in joint procurement activities and in GPO work. And I'm happy to say that, you know, very proud of the work they've done in this space as well. So I actually was going to move on to some of the challenges and successes we've had, if that's okay. I'd like to start with...
Yeah, if we could, I want to make sure we get the rest of the panelists. I so appreciate your passion. And I didn't expect that all of our panelists would have so much energy and so much to say, but that's a positive thing. Thank you for that. James, do we have any questions that we might be able to pose to Simrit from the audience?
Yes. Yes, there was a question raised. It said all businesses have been impacted by COVID-19, and minority businesses have been impacted specifically a little different than other businesses. So what can major corporations do to ensure that they reach out and help secure or maintain minority suppliers?
That's a great question. I'll share with you some of the things that we are doing as examples. One, I can reach out to my tier ones or my large spend suppliers and start mandating that for the next year, fiscal year, I need them to go to my local community and the diverse suppliers around me and ensure a certain % of the spend is getting targeted towards those suppliers. Secondarily, what we're doing is we're having conversations with diverse suppliers about immediate needs that have come out of this pandemic. So think about PPE and that last mile supply chain security. Things from warehousing to transportation to local manufacturing are being discussed at the state level. And what we are doing is ensuring that diversity is part of that conversation. So I believe that COVID-19 gives us an opportunity to redefine supply chain and suppliers in this country. There's a lot of national dialogue around reshoring. Diversity has to be part of that conversation. Our moment is now, and we're capitalizing on it. And secondarily, on an immediate basis, let's redirect some of our tier one spend to our diverse vendors.
Simrit, thank you so much. I love your passion, your energy, your authenticity. I think that that's really what is needed. Let's move to our fourth panelist, and that's Raj Naranj, and she is the Assistant Vice President and Director of Inclusion and Diversity Strategies at the Fifth Third Bancorp. Raj?
All right, thank you so much, Eric. Can everyone hear me? Oh,
I can hear you.
Just like Simrit said, I start off with that. Awesome. All right, well, thank you, OMSDC, for hosting this wonderful conference, and thank you to the panelists, and Eric, thank you for moderating. And also starting us in the context of doing the survey and the results that you shared with us. So all of those are very helpful to understand the discrepancy where corporates see themselves and where MBEs see corporate responses. So I'm going to take, given my role in the bank, which is, again, everyone, I'm Raj Naranj. I'm Director of Inclusion and Diversity Strategies for Fifth Third Bank. In this role, I support Stephanie Smith, who's our Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer. So the context that I'm going to give you is a little bit of a wider context before I get into the supplier diversity aspects of it. So right after the social unrest, after the unfortunate death of George Floyd, we took a couple of big steps and significant steps, I would say. First, of course, our President, Chairman, and CEO came out with a statement, which I know seems symbolic, but it's extremely important for employees, for the communities, for our customers to understand where does this organization stand, where does the leadership stand, right? So our stance is strictly, that we are against racism, that we stand against racial and social injustice. With that being said, he has meetings with his senior leaders in the coming days, including our CIDO, Stephanie Smith, and two significant announcements were made after that. First of which was standing up of Accelerating Racial Equality, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative, which is a long-term initiative that is being stood up with the help of our Program Management Office. The reason it is significant is because every time the bank has had a significant issue or a challenge to tackle, we bring together our enterprise office to lead these kind of initiatives, which not only bring about a near-term success, but also ensure that this is sustained over years and that it is embedded into all of these procedures going forward. And there have been a number of successes we've had having these kind of initiatives stood up by enterprise program. So the charge of this particular initiative is towards three constituents. First, our Black employees. Secondly, our Black customers. And thirdly, our Black communities. So understanding that these are very important stakeholders for the bank, and the initiative mandate is to do different and to accelerate efforts that are already happening in this space. So this is a long-term initiative. So to answer Carlton's earlier comments, it's almost like, Carlton, when you were speaking, I was taking notes. It's almost like, we were hearing your voice. This is something that we started. And the other significant initiative that was announcement that was announced is about standing up of our Executive Diversity Leadership Council. So this is a body of 8 direct reports of Greg Carmichael, and also includes 5 of our top leaders from the management committee of the bank. And so this particular body of work is actually going to oversee the work of the Accelerating Racial Equality, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative to ensure that there is accountability, to ensure that there is sustainment of these efforts year after year, unless it becomes policies and practices in the longer term. And also to provide that thought leadership and resources that we need. So in the past 3 months, we have brought to bear a lot of resources, brain trust of the organization and our leaders in solving for these initiatives. So we are starting to look at not only what we can do near term, but also longer term. So there is a lot of effort happening in this space, and we meet on a weekly basis. Coming back to Carlton's point, so this is something that we are not reacting to, and something that Nalini also spoke about. We don't want to be reactive. We want to be responsive. And so this is our longer term strategy around it. And understanding that this environment was very, very difficult for our employees, we stood up another, took immediate steps, and 3 significant steps I want to particularly talk about. First is that we started holding Let's Talk sessions, and those were actually led by Marsha Thornton, who's also a director of Supplier Diversity, and co-chair of our African American BRGs. So we held those sessions with our, initially with 7 sessions, and the outcome was significant in not only that we were able to provide these safe forums for the employees to express themselves, how they are feeling, given the tension in the atmosphere, but also to understand what recommendations that they have for us. So their feedback gave us tremendous input into the effort of the initiative that we stood up, how we are going to move forward in creating this feedback loop, taking these Let's Talk sessions, summing the feedback, and bringing it back to the EDLC and to the initiative. Further sessions and dialogue continued, where we opened it out to the larger organization to understand varying perspectives on the tensions and where everyone feels about this. Simrit talked about this, right? Having a broader dialogue. So we started on that journey to understand where everybody feels like, how are they approaching this situation? Because it is a difficult conversation to have. It's 400 years of systemic racism, and people have perspectives, and to start to learn what is their voice, what's their perspective, and to bringing about this kind of a, coming together of minds, if you will. And in support of that, also simultaneously, what we did is that, this was an effort we started last year, but we found that it was an opportune time to roll this out throughout the organization, which is to undertake the launch of unconscious bias training or implicit bias training, Eric, which you referred to earlier. in your opening statement.
About 30 seconds.
So we launched it to the entire population base. And we also have created an inclusion toolkit for our employees. It's a rich repository of resources where people are able to understand the lived experiences of Black population in America, and to understand where they can, take it from awareness to the advocacy and become an ally to their friends in the Black community and to the employees. On the supplier diversity side of things, we have partnered with NMSDC to sponsor a program. It's called In This Together, and this is a COE specifically targeting supplier development initiative, which is going to be launched in January with a curriculum from Rutgers. And we are going deeply inside our Tier 2 program to look at entrenchment of supplier diversity, not only in our prime suppliers, but also to look at how we can make this more sustainable and hold our prime suppliers accountable for the Tier 2 spend going forward. And I know that I got a call out for that. We have limited time now, so I'll stop there and I'll accept or add further to the conversation if there are questions.
Right. I certainly want to thank you, Raj, for that exciting presentation. I would say certainly this is not your grandfather's Fifth Third Bancorp. I've been familiar with Fifth Third for a number of years, and you all have certainly come a long way in terms of the things that you're doing. Because of our time, I'm going to move. James, let's hold off on questions this time because we went a little bit over there. I want to make sure that we do have enough time to get every panelist in. We're going to move to our fifth panelist, which is Stephen Hightower. He's the president and CEO of Hightower Petroleum, and he's an NMSDC Corporate Plus member. So, Steve, why don't you go ahead and take it away, introduce yourself, and maybe respond to those questions. Your microphone is not on. Yep.
Still not there?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Thank you guys for giving me this opportunity to speak before this distinguished group. You asked two questions, and one was how did the COVID-19 virus and the global protest impact our business, whether that was positively or negatively, and then does racial equity through supplier diversity, what does that mean to me, and would that signal that sustainable progress is being made? And, I'd like to reflect back to the day that, this became really real, shortly just coming back from Dubai towards the end of February. And when it was finally announced that, we knew that they were going to shut down Ohio. It was a very scary day for myself. You go you're going full blast, things are going well, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, just stop. General Motors and Nissan and Honda, they all stopped. All that revenue just stopped. Everything else that we were doing with the waste management and FedExes went down to probably 40% of their normal volume. All for the very first time, what are you going to do? And this was not time to retreat, but it was a time to get going and really motivate not just yourself, because that was a very scary time, but you also had to continue to motivate your employees. And so we put right into action, calling all of our customers and calling all our suppliers and letting them know that we would be available, and putting a process to go remotely before the actual shutdown had actually took place. And we were prepared because we are one of those types of services that is essential and that requires that people still have to move on gasoline and or diesel fuel. So not totally reinventing ourselves, but internally changing how we operate, but then also looking at what within that industry that we could actually begin to work with, i.e. alcohol for those who's now generating a lot of hand sanitizers, looking in alternative areas, you would be surprised of the not so nice things that come out of this, where actually you had to have trailers that had to be cooled because the bodies that were being affected and dying overran the hospitals. And so we began to have to fuel actual trailers of individuals who had died relative to the COVID virus. These are some of the things that are different. And but what we had to do is we had to continue to step up and continue to look forward. And so it was a time that I think for minority businesses, it's a time to change the dialogue. And the dialogue for minority businesses that really need to be changed, I believe, is that minority does not necessarily mean small. And you have to, the things and the programs that people look at, they many times look at percentages of, I'll give you 10% of this and 20% of that, versus looking at our capacity to do 100% of those particular contracts. And fortunately, the members of the NMSDC have led the way with those of us, or I should say those corporations that's been a part of the $1 billion roundtable. They're still leading the way. And they're leading the way not just for corporations around the country, but they're also leading the way in front of government as well. I was very surprised when you say, you know, is this sustainable, and are we having a new look and a new outlook as it relates to minority businesses? And I would have to say there has been a uptick in the opportunities coming to even Hightower in these last month or so, because companies that we had knocked on doors for 15, 20 years that all of a sudden began to call and offer opportunities to at least have that opportunity to bid. So from that standpoint, I have seen that there have been corporations that have stepped up. But just last week, in talking to Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, our Ohio Congresswoman, and she sits on the Small Business Committee, and she told me that an announcement last week from the administration was that no longer would they have to do minority business. It was discriminatory, and that there would be no more compliance in the federal government relative to subcontracting with minority businesses. That's shocking. It's shocking that in 2020, we have a divided outlook as to what does it actually mean, Black Lives Matter, and this whole revolution of conversation taking place, but still part of our country still thinks that this is a bad and a negative thing to have small minority-owned companies grow, provide jobs, provide economic development, provide opportunity not just for ourselves, but for the corporations to be able to do better. And so, am I convinced that this is leading to the utopia that we all would like to see? No, we're not there yet. And I'm sure we're not there in the bowels of corporations where these decisions are actually being made. And while we do have the change in top leadership, Procter & Gamble stepping up, Kroger stepping up, many others, stepping up, it's encouraging to know that those corporate members of NMSDC is leading the way. And we need to make sure that the world knows that we've got corporations stepping up and leading the way. But we as minority companies have to begin to change our mindset as well. And thinking small, wanting to be small just to participate in a small program is not where we need to be. So if we challenge corporations to step up and do more and give us bigger opportunities, we as minority companies need to understand how to step into those opportunities, whether it's developing larger supply chains, whether it's developing joint ventures with larger corporations, whatever it is to step up and become bigger and better and being able to do acquisitions and be able to grow. And it's possible to be a $1 million business and grow to $1 billion business because it's in the mindset and it's not necessarily in the roadblocks that is put in every day to prevent you from growing. And as Hightower Petroleum Company, and even on our clean side, HP Energy, and those companies that we support as mentors and mentees, or female businesses that we support, like Next Generation Fuels, or the veterans companies in DC that we support to get into this business. These are the kind of things that we really need to really change the mindset of ourselves, which, as we present to these corporations, giving them an opportunity to do better and more as well.
Powerful, thank you. Obviously, those of you that are listening, there's no question about the passion that these panelists are bringing to this conversation. And so we're going to move quickly to our sixth and final panelist, and then we may have a few minutes left to go to audience questions. So we're going to go to Joe McClain. He is the Supplier Diversity Director for the Eaton Corporation, but also Vice Chair of the Ohio OMSDC Board of Directors. So, Joe, I don't know if we're going to have you just audio-wise, but why don't you go ahead and present.
Yes. Yep, thanks a lot, Eric. Listen, I am going to save us some time. I'm going to give us some time back because, listen, there's a lot of knowledge, power, passion with the panelists that have already spoken. And I apologize that I'm having some challenges with my my video, but I'm not hiding. I'll make that really clear. I'm not trying to be unseen. Listen, Eric, first of all, Eric, thank you for setting the stage, providing some backdrop, the information that you shared, powerful stuff. If you don't know me, you know, let's have a sidebar because everything that has been said I agree with and I can add some stuff to it. But I just want to kind of, you guys have already met me. You know, our company is committed to supply diversity. There's no doubt. We have one of the most diverse companies in the United States. Our CEO is African American. Our chief counsel is African American female. Our chief human resources officer is a black female. And that didn't happen by coincidence. You know, that happened from deliberate action. The other thing that I would have you know is that we've been on this journey, this path. Mr. Hightower mentioned about the pinnacle of success as it relates to supply diversity is to get to the $1 billion roundtable. I've made it my personal commitment, and Eaton has adopted that as a strategy for our company to close the gap on where we are, about $830 million of spend with diverse suppliers to get to the $1 billion roundtable. And that goal is extremely aspirational for our company simply because, you know, the average annual revenue of the companies that make up the BDR are about $150 billion. We're a $20 billion company. But we're used to punching above our weight class. No big deal there. So excited about everything that I've heard. I will kind of leave you with this in terms of what are we doing and what are we planning to do. Our company took a stance in terms of developing what we call employee resource groups. They're affinity-based, and I am the national leader for the African American Employee Resource Group, which is called ICANET. You know, within those groups, we know that there's no one solution. I heard Ellie Bradford when she talked about we can't fix everything. You know, look, there's no silver bullet to what we're experiencing in the United States. There's no elixir. You know, I think everybody's kind of patiently waiting and hoping that there's going to be a vaccine for COVID-19. And I pray that we get one. But I believe that in this day and time, we have to be ready to do our part and also do whatever else is necessary. If the vaccine comes for COVID-19 and it's not a full solution, again, I think we may have to partially quarantine, partially take the medicine, partially take care of ourselves. And I take that same approach as it relates to inclusion and diversity. We can't fix everything in supply diversity. We can't fix everything in hiring diverse individuals. We can't fix everything in just, you know, working on our communities. But collectively, if we do all those things together and we get the right people involved, and you, on the other end of this camera, if you make your voice heard through your vote, through your activism, through dictating where your dollars are spent, then collectively we can make the difference that we want to see. And so, again, Eaton is focused on three things: listen, learn, and lead. And I won't exhaust those topics because I know we want to get to some questions, but I'm happy to have one-on-one conversations with anyone who would like to. Again, Eric, thank you for doing such a phenomenal job, and kudos to all the other panel members.
Joe, I appreciate you delivering some time back to the panel and back to the audience. I'm so grateful that I'm the moderator now because I get a chance to prefer the questions of those of you that are in the audience. And so we've only got about 7 or 8 minutes left. But James, what questions do we have? I want to go immediately to the questions that you may have.
Okay, Eric, I have one question. I'm not sure who this will be focused on, but it says, do you think companies should go back to the ghostwriters like they had on airlines? This is where individuals disguise themselves as passengers to get the real response from the employees of companies that are supposed to be diverse friendly. So I'll leave that question out there to the panelists.
Anybody want to respond to that? It's actually an interesting question. Did everybody understand the question?
I don't know that I can answer the question. I can maybe give some perspective.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Eric? Okay, thanks. You know, I mentioned a lot, and I know other corporations have too, had lots of dialogue with their work groups on racial inequalities. And I can just give some examples from P&G on why I don't think we need kind of people to come in and find out they're really, because we have had some very open conversations, very emotional conversations. Our senior leaders get together still every month, and they always have a couple people prepared to share something about their personal journey. And honestly, it's amazing that you've known some of these people for 20, 30 years, high up in the ranks of P&G, and you've never heard some of their experiences before. So from my point of view, and I'm probably not the exact right person to share the sentiment, but I know Carla Cobb's on the phone from P&G, and she would probably say the same thing, that she has heard some very open dialogue. So for us, I'm not sure that we would gain a whole lot, as I feel like
right. I'm going to weigh in just
open.
a little bit to say that I do think something like that could be helpful because there was a study that was done by Gallup of full-time workers around the globe where they found in 2017 that 85% of people don't like their jobs and 75% of people hate their bosses. And I think that it's difficult sometimes to get honesty within the corporation. Just like police officers have body cameras, I actually have been thinking that it'd be nice to have some innovations that even like an Apple Watch that may give each of us feedback around how we're feeling as we're interacting with each other. I think these are great times that we're in. So Nalini, I appreciate that part of it. But I think on an ongoing basis, that's certainly one of the things that I'm seeking to try to collaborate with people that focus on artificial intelligence to see if we can get some other solutions that might give us data. James, what else do you have? Yes.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry. Okay. It said what they've seen in the open market with regards to contracts, that they are asking MBEs to participate, and the suggestion is that companies, the percentage of minority participation be at or around 10%. And the question to the corporates would be, what are they doing, what are the corporations doing to close that gap to ensure that we at least meet the 10% threshold and maybe even exceed that?
Simrit, why don't you weigh in on that? I think you had a response to the other question as well. Yeah.
Can you hear me? I'll start with that. I think Steve Hightower has really enlightened me and encouraged me to think broader. I treat every one of these opportunities as a learning opportunity, and yes, these 10% set-asides or exceeding them are part of my KPIs and performance goals. But more and more, I'm interested in this idea of how do you start small but grow big? What are the spaces in which you start by doing 1 or 2 facilities but then own the enterprise? So I like to focus my energies more on spaces where I can create that big idea for a minority company. You know, we've done a lot around creating what I would call tier 2 spend, 10 to 20% set-asides, but I get very excited when we can take one of those companies and get them to 100%. And we've done that. We've done that with 3 or 4 businesses, and that is highly satisfying.
Steve, Carlton, either of you want to weigh in on that, or Raj?
No. Okay, great. You know, as I've been in business pretty much all my life, and when programs began to start in 1979 and, you know, 80, 81, it was, you know, always a percentage of. And many companies chose not to grow big so that they could stay in the set-aside program. And even on the federal level, people don't want to go too big to get out of the federal programming. Looking at the private sector, which is where everybody can do exactly in terms of the corporations, they can buy, they can develop, they can do things that they want to do. They're not regulated to just a 5% or 10%. And so once we get to a point where we understand that it's much, much better to be a $50, $100 million company that's not a set-aside versus being a $5 and $10 million company to stay in a set-aside. And we change that thinking of trying to stay small because we think there's a competitive advantage there versus becoming a real player in the industries that we work within. That's where we, as a African American, Hispanic, Indian, and other minorities, we've got to take our minds there. And when we begin to think and project that, then the corporations will begin to receive that. And we then become masters of our own destiny and not necessarily subject to just the help that a lot of us need to get started. I got started on a set-aside, so I am not bringing the ladder up and trying to burn it such that the next person cannot. However, when you're climbing that ladder, you don't want to stay at the bottom. You've got to have your sights of being at the top, and that's what we really have to change within ourselves to have the corporations look at us
Carlton,
in a
you all
different
have
way.
the last word. We've got 2 minutes, and then we'll be closing out our session. Raj.
Perfect. If I could chime in real quick. So, Steve Hightower, great words. I think I want to take it just a step further. And I think it's around, we talk about leadership and development. So, you know, honestly, growing up, you got to take a step back and say, you know, how many of us grew up with parents that were CEOs or CFOs of 100 million or 300, 500 billion dollar companies? You're a product of your environment. So you get small MBEs or like, you know, I just want to make 6 figures personally, or I just want to be a $2 million company. They really don't understand what it means to be a $100 million company or $200 million company. So I think when corporations can help step in and do a little bit of training from we talk about supply chain, or we talk about, you know, financials. I mean, you got a lot of minority businesses don't even really understand their own P&L. I mean, I think that's where corporations can step in and also foster and help them get to that next level through some leadership and some training. So.
Thank you, Carlton. Raj, you have the final word, and then I'm going to introduce this video. Raj? Is Raj still with us? Yes.
Here.
I'm not thinking so. We cannot hear.
Okay.
Please proceed.
What an exciting panel. You know when it's been good, when the time just has blown by. There's so much more that we could talk about, but I think that there are opportunities for us to have sidebars with one another to continue this dialogue. I want to wrap up with a